everybody. I'm Matan Runya. I am an RPG player and dungeon master, and I am a book writer for both medieval and modern fiction. And I am, for the really one of the rare occasions, actually in the element of my expertise. Now, I would like to apologize for two things before we get this video started. Number one, this quality of the video is not exactly the greatest. That is because the one and only actually camera I have, besides my laptop camera there, is MIA. I have absolutely no idea where it is. I've tried to find it multiple times over the past month, and it's gone. I'm going to probably just have to find a new one. The second is this is unscripted. Alright, I typically don't have a script for my videos because I go off the script way too much. I don't really pay much attention to the script. And so if I go ahead and do a couple tangents or ramble, I apologize. That is also why this is a video, not a short, because I tried doing this as a short and it did not work. It went too long. The topic today is disabilities in fantasy. Because there's this one particular vocal guy over on Twitter or X or however you call it, who likes to insist stupid things about fantasy. And one of them, which keeps popping up, is magic should not be easier for you to accept in a fantasy setting than someone with disabilities. We're going to break that down. We are really going to break that down today. Because that negates the magic. Like, they're not mutually there, right? If you're going to insist something about a fantasy setting, it should not be based on whether or not we accept things about magic. You see, that is called suspensive disbelief. It is, we know that this isn't real, we're going to suspend the knowledge that it's not real, so we can enjoy it. Now, this is one of the few areas that I actually have expertise in, which I'm excited. I'm not just on the sideline shooting my shot from afar. It's like, no, this is actually something I deal with on a daily basis. Now, it is important to note that you have low magic and high magic fantasy settings. Low magic fantasy settings are where you might find someone who is disabled, because it did happen. In historic times, you do have people who lost limbs, or eyes, or were deaf, or who couldn't speak. That did exist. And low magic, it's not defined rules, right? You have something like Lord of the Rings, which is a masterpiece. That is low magic. The rules aren't defined. Magic is not really common in everyday life. You have a select few people that know magic. It's not something you can just teach around. That is where you'll find someone who's disabled. In both an RPG or a book. Absolutely. However, what I'm referring to specifically is there's this picture that keeps popping up, and it's an incredibly shredded orc whose thighs can crush my head in a wheelchair. And you are not going to find that in either of these settings. Now, the reason for that, and again, talking about specifically about the low magic settings in both a book and an RPG. In an RPG, you aren't really looking at the common folk. Alright, you may encounter them, but an RPG is specifically centered around the party. The party's decisions or actions moving around the world, that's where the story shifts its focus to. In a party, you logically breaking it down, you have a select group of elite adventurers who go from town to town for primarily money. Like, that's typically for adventures, it's either money or adventure. And you are going specifically to the most dangerous places you can find, fixing the problems that no one else can. You are not going to find someone who can't come along with you. Really, your lives are on the line. You are not a pity party. People are not there because you're like, oh, we're friends, come on in. People are there because they can hold some specific job that you need, right? The tanks in an RPG, they are there to absorb the damage to keep everyone else safe. Your rogues in an RPG, they're there for their expertise in traps, in locks, and getting around behind the enemy. Your archers picking enemies off from far. If it's a low magic setting, you wouldn't have really wizard, so you might have instead the equivalent of a medic or something like that, someone who's experienced in healing herbs. And each person in this party is going to have an area of expertise and not someone you have to protect. Escort missions are objectively the worst. You do not want one of your party to be one of the ones that you're trying to keep alive. Alright? In that setting, death is very common among adventuring parties. You do not really find old adventurers, and if you do, you respect the old adventurers. But to do that, you need to be fit. You need to be deadly. And someone who cannot hear is not going to hear the shorts. See? 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 Shouts commanded by the rest of the party. The party members, the party leaders. They're not going to be able to hear. You can't see in a low magic fantasy setting. You're not going into anywhere with the party. You're not going to haul someone who's blind into a life-threatening situation. Unless they have specific knowledge for that specific task, and then you get them there, you get them back, you say bye. You can't afford to have someone who's dragging you down like that. Someone who is in a wheelchair, which, by the way, was not very common back then. It was more crutches. They move slow. They are not going to be able to go down the vast majority of rough terrain your party is going to be going down. You can't really take them. They literally can't access there. Someone who can't speak, you'll actually find, honestly, if I had to make the choice, you would find someone who is deaf or partly deaf or mute. The most common among adventuring parties, and that might, but deaf, again, that's kind of iffy. Mute, you will find that, because that's, you can still go, you can still make the sound of distress, you can still hear, you can still see, you can still get everywhere. That would be something that I'd say I wouldn't really think twice of someone going along an adventure party. Especially if they are someone who is either supposed to be silent, like a rogue, or someone whose expertise is healing. That actually is not strange. But again, the argument I normally see is for like people in wheelchairs. It's like, no, definitely not. Now, in a book, the thing that I don't think a lot of people realize about books is, yes, there is like the chosen one, right? There, for the heroes, there is the archetype of the chosen one, someone who's in prophecy, and sometimes you just have the ordinary heroes. But there's a reason you don't find a book that goes halfway through and the hero dies. We are not talking about Martin. Okay. But typically, you're not going to have that. Or in the rare occasions where you do, you're going to have someone who picks it up and continues on, right? But typically, because it's the hero, there is an unspoken agreement between the reader and the author that the author isn't going to kill off the main character. That makes for a pretty poor book. Unless it's set up for a younger inheritor to continue on. And it's that you have to be very careful about. So a book, actually, what you're going to find in it is the hero continues all the way through, right? And the story is set around the hero. The story is not... there's a nuance there that I think I can best explain. The story is not built around the hero enters the story. The challenges are not built around the hero must enter and face them. The challenges were there before. There is a kind of misconception that the story happens for the hero. And, at least in my mind, the hero enters the story. Which is why you find the heroes typically living all the way through and facing the challenges successfully. Because the storytellers aren't going to go, we're going to choose this guy to enter and he's dead. Oh, that'll make a great story. No. You're going to find the heroes able to go ahead and actually complete the story. That's the point. So, in a fantasy setting, a low fantasy setting, like Lord of the Rings, in fact, let's take Lord of the Rings, because Lord of the Rings really is that's the top shelf for fantasy. That J.R.R. Tolkien literally built it for us. The first really well known, first really done fantasy. That is the benchmark. All right, that is what made everything possible. That is what we try to emulate. Um, you could have gone anywhere in a wheelchair or crutches. You would have been caught by the farmer in the beginning if you were the hobbit. You would not have left the city if you were one of the men. The elves apparently never have anything like that. But you certainly wouldn't have been a adventuring elf if you couldn't move. Uh, how many times do they have to yell warnings or hear warnings or jump the mines of Moria? That ring any bells? The swimming, the running. No, you had. They spent how many days running after the hobbits or from the stupid Nazgul? No, that wouldn't happen. And kind of the same thing with being blind. Um, One thing that I'd like to note about that is the guy without the eye. That wasn't CGI. The guy actually did not have an eye, and when he was being cast, I believe it was Peter Jackson asked him to remove it, like remove the patch, and he did. And Peter Jackson's like, "You need to keep that." He requested the guy didn't have an eye patch, so you see that, and the moment of him turning and yelling "fire" always kind of struck me as the viewer for specifically the movies. Yes, sue me. I like the movies. But that moment, he gave all you got the impression of a grizzled battle veteran, one who has seen the horror before. It, it is a moment I love. And actually, because of that, the guy got a lot more comfortable with actually missing the eye. So, stuff like that does exist in low magic settings for both areas, especially in soldiers, where they may be missing a limb, or an eye, or an ear, or their face is messed up. But, that tangent aside, he wasn't missing both. You have to see the enemy. Uh, so that really in a low magic setting, you aren't going to have someone who can't take care of themselves fighting, or trying to run after. In a high magic setting, where suddenly you may have that more prevalent, right? You now have, say, devices that can actually, like wheelchairs and stuff like that, can haul people around. And let's look at the disabilities real fast for a high magic RPG. System like Dungeons and Dragons. Blindness, lesser restoration. Deafness, lesser restoration. Being mute, lesser restoration. Being crippled, lesser restoration. There's literally a spell for that. It is a great starting hook. Alright, I actually built a RPG character who was in a wheelchair to start into this RPG. She had fallen from a tree when she was very young. She had been very adventurous. She had broken her spine. She survived. She was crippled. Her father essentially built her a ramp tower, bunch of books. She was basically almost like a scientist because she couldn't leave. So the outside world was brought to her. And the entire thing for her then being able to get into the world is then she was basically, magic came to her that made her able to walk, that removed that. And suddenly she's like, I can actually go interact with the world. There was not a lot of stuff her family could do to stop her. Once she got that, she was gone. She was absolutely entering the adventuring world. If you're doing one where someone is crippled, well, they could go to a local temple that has people that can cast this magic very easily, and if they can't afford it, that might be the hook for their adventure. Suddenly, they are now in debt to the temple and have to go take care of something, so they or get money or take care of a specific task. Any freaking injury. Alright, the entire concept of, well, if you accept magic's there, then you have to accept disability. It's no more strange. No, it's actually more strange. In a high magic setting, why someone would be adventuring like that. Humans, I don't know if you noticed, we're very easy. We like to take the easy road. We like stuff being convenient. So please tell me, if you're someone who can't speak and has been dealing with that your entire life, and suddenly you've got magic to be able to speak, why? And you adventurers are pretty damn wealthy. Alright, it's not hard for them to get wealthy. You're gonna tell me that you'd rather not speak and have a bunch of gold and go spend on other stuff? If I couldn't see, I'm like, I have enough gold. That is the first thing I'm gonna go do. I'm gonna get my sight back. You're in a wheelchair. You wouldn't be able to enter into that adventure in the first place. I don't know if you noticed, dungeons are not wheelchair accessible. Kind of, you know. There's not really ramps. There's stairs. There's pit traps. They're not really wheelchair friendly. You're gonna tell me that you wouldn't go get your spine healed? It's a great hook. That's the entire thing. Is disabilities absolutely existed in a historical setting. But in a magic setting, it makes no sense why a main character would still be disabled when it actually doesn't cost a lot of gold and it is very easy to get that done. Seriously, it's very easy and very convenient. Nobody would willingly stay with a disability. And if you're talking about a book setting, no, kind of the same thing. Uh, Number one, you don't have the same mechanics as an RPG, so it's not like you'd be going to the local temple to get healed and start. It just goes back to an RPG. That's the entire RPG hook. In a book setting where you aren't dealing with a party, you aren't dealing with all the mechanics there, you're in a very magical world, but you can't walk. I am not going to write a 120,000 word book. I took my wheelchair to the window, and then I took it to the bed, and then I took the bed to the outhouse, and then I took the outhouse to the kitchen table, and I took it from the kitchen table to the window. I'm sorry, the entire point of a book is to entertain. And again, the story is not built around the hero. The hero enters the story. It is kind of one of those things of anyone who's qualified should be able to enter it. You should be able to have a bunch of different types of heroes and style of heroes be able to enter into this world and take care of this problem. Yes, you have the chosen hero type of thing, but also you have people that just decide that the problem needs to be taken care of, and so they take care of it. Some of the best books are the ones who don't have to be there, but are going to choose to be there anyways. You don't have to have someone who has this major disability, and if you want to talk about ones where they can counter that, 1 second, finishing up the book, stay on track, it's not going to be entertaining. And the entire way that it's going to be believable and make people go, okay, I want to watch this, is either if there's a great counter that basically turns this weakness into their strength, which I'm sorry, wheelchair accessible is not that, or they find a way to fix it and they're able to enter the adventure. And what I mean by that first point, second one we've already taken care of, but the first point, Toph, Avatar: The Last Airbender, blind, right? But she has a way to see. And even in like Dungeons and Dragons, you've got stuff like that. You got blindsight or telepathy or stuff like that. She is, and that's actually been an inspiration for children, is because she's had this weakness that she turned into a strength. But it's not like she couldn't see and was using a walking stick the entire time. She had a way to see. And you can do that. You can enter that in. But if you notice, there's not actually a lot of argument for the whole deaf or blind or mute or anything like that. It's always like, wheelchairs, 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 wheelchairs. It doesn't work. Again, you have to either have it fixed, or there has to be some counter that basically nullifies it. Because I guess the entire point is fantasy is an escape. Okay, that's what it is. Fantasy is an absolute escape from the real world. It's why you typically don't have a lot of people killing off a bunch of characters in random deaths. Martin absolutely overdid that. Now that once it lost its shock value, people are like, okay, this is boring and senseless. If I want a bunch of random death, I'll just live my life. Thank you very much. If I want to go ahead and see all this tragedy occurring, I'm going to live my life. Because I don't need to read a book or watch a movie for that, or play a game for that. So fantasy is an escape. Magical fantasy is absolutely an escape. It is suddenly magic is able to counter everything that would have been wrong. Magic is able to heal all the injuries, bring people back to life. It is, I can throw fireballs from my fingertips. It's not meant to be real. It's not meant to mirror reality. It's supposed to be an escape from it so you can forget about the shitty world for a few hours. And so if you're trying to suddenly turn fantasy into reality, make it realistic, you've just missed the entire point. There are shows, there are movies, there are books that are not fantasy, don't have magic involved, that have characters with disabilities. Because that makes sense. Nowhere in a magical world does it make sense for the main character, the people going around solving all the problems, to have these disabilities. When magic frickin' exists to heal it. It's the problem with that initial argument of it shouldn't be easier to accept. It's actually harder to accept because, again, there's so many ways for that to be countered, so many ways for these injuries to be healed. You're not going to, if you're living with this and you're not fantasizing about it, sickos, you would absolutely take a way to get rid of this as soon as possible. Okay? It is very mentally unhealthy people, very mentally ill people, that fantasize about having a wheelchair and going into a dungeon. It's people who apparently aren't special enough in their own lives. And so they are mocking something that exists. They're mocking people that exist with these disabilities and doing it very. I don't even think they even realize it. They even know about it. But no, that is very disrespectful to people who actually deal with that on day-to-day life. You're going to play a character that has these disabilities? But you weren't getting enough pity points for being an idiot? Anyways, I think the video is devolving. I've said about everything I need to say. Thank you, and the video quality will certainly get better.